A title or headline to a video is essential to how the audience initially perceives said video before even watching it. There is a certain skill that is needed to accurately make a title truthful to the content you present, but also enticing enough to click on. Many seem to lack this skill or seem to dismiss the idea of having an honest title, which is why clickbait is used. Clickbait has become more of a derogatory term in our cyberspace lexicon, mostly for good reason. Clickbait destroys the traditional rules of journalism by exploiting the information it gives rather than provide proper context for. However, due to the persistence of change through time, the ethics of clickbait and consequentially journalism have been tested and altered, YouTube being no exception to this rule. I'm going to explore what constitutes clickbait and the ever-changing ethical quandaries that surround it by taking two positions on it, for and against. But before I can even get close to diving into the layers of this conundrum, I have to address the term itself directly and how it's used. Like I said before, clickbait is generally perceived as a derogatory term. However, the term has always been morally ambiguous. Clickbait is inherently against the ethical rules of journalism and is a malpractice. However, what exactly makes something clickbait? For instance, say the thumbnail of this video just says, "Donald Trump kills infant by pouring boiling milk on its skull." Is it clickbait? Since you are watching this video, you will most certainly agree with this assertion. Why? Because it has nothing to do with what I'm saying in this video. However, I do mention it as an example of extreme hyperbole because I only focus on one little tiny aspect of my piece. This is obviously a terrible choice of a thumbnail and doesn't represent what I'm talking about fully, but for a few points allow me to play devil's advocate here. The code of ethics for journalism isn't directly set in stone when the media and format constantly evolve. The internet and its ease of access has made consuming and digesting information way more instant and disposable. We are in a time where everyone is competing for everyone's attention in a very volatile environment. Information is so hastily consumed that there is a massive influx of it all. We often look for efficient ways to shuffle through it. It all really comes down to how effective the information is given to us rather than what we take away from it. Our patience for reading has become so minuscule that most now only perceive information from a headline rather than attempt to give it fuller context. Personally, I can be pretty guilty of this. We would rather just watch a video where the information is spoon-fed to us rather than attempt to conceptualize and interpret symbols and letters that exist on a page. Just another way of saying read. With that in mind, clickbait can be a very good resource for making people scroll through your article and watch your video. Again, first impressions matter the most. Effective and easily processed thumbnails on YouTube videos tend to make it more successful. With the volatility and oversaturation of the playing field, it's hard to reflect on our ethical codes when creating content. Some people make titles and videos with the intention of making money off it. As disingenuous as it sounds, we all have to realize that when we are making a video or writing an article, we subconsciously exploit the information we present for our own gain. Personally, I think exploitation and profit are one and the same. It's just a matter of how much you want to concern yourself with the moral ramifications. The only thing that really matters is how truthful the information we provide actually is. However, that statement I just made is also becoming extremely convoluted due to how relative truth in nature is. Example being how information and statistics are perceived from each side of our current socio-political landscape. As dystopian and alarming as this sounds, the content's allurement has become more important than the content itself. The landscape has become so antagonistic with its drive for attention that the titles have to be hyperbolic in order to even get seen. On YouTube, content creators have to make advantage of the site's demographics' low attention span to even compete. Remember that people only watch the first 5 seconds of a video to see if they're engaged or not. There are tons of people who blatantly use clickbait to their advantage who still present the information it advertised. Honestly, I hate to even encourage the use of hyperbole and go for modesty in the presentation, but the landscape is way too volatile for that. Throughout time, we have done some refining to our moral ideals that ultimately shapes the world around us. What we perceive as decency is more of a reaction to our environment around us rather than absolute truth. So when wanting to profit off something you created or report on, it's a safer practice to try and allure people with a hyperbolic title. Mind you that I'm trying to speak both on YouTube videos and journalism at the same time. Just remember that these things differ in a lot of ways. Clickbait and news journalism should be contemned no matter what, but unfortunately, that falls under the principles I just went over here. What I am really saying here is that clickbait can be hard to criticize when everyone around you is competing for attention. Clickbait's definition is constantly changing and evolving because of the internet and how huge it is. Now, let me play devil's advocate a little more. Who is to really blame for who clicks on a video or article? What lies at the core of this question is how well the creator of said product exploits and manipulates the emotions or sensibilities of the viewer by its title or thumbnail. But how much of that blame is on the audience? Really, this may come down to how well you can detect disingenuous content from just the headline or title. Personally, one should be able to tell if something is clearly malpractice from instinct. There is a blame we have to put on ourselves for indulging ourselves on clearly bad content and art. However, it really just comes down to how effective the people who make it manipulate your emotions. I don't want to jumble my message in this video. I am strongly against clickbait as a practice, but I can empathize with it being used because of the landscape. However, what I didn't address is the dangerous ramifications of clickbait. I mentioned that before this, that clickbait is primarily used for page clicks and doesn't always accurately represent its content. In relation to journalism, we no longer have to pay for news. It's easily accessible through the web and social media. This of course changed the whole landscape and how the business model of the media is run. The dangers of this is clearly spreading misinformation and potential hysteria. We've seen it time and time again. With YouTube, content has always been free, excluding paid content or YouTube Red shows. Because clickbait has always been rampant on here, the people who are most effective in this are usually the most successful. While you can argue that much of YouTube can be dissolved down to useless disposable content, clickbait makes that argument way more valid. The amount of useless and mundane trite on this website usually comes down to how much better the thumbnail and title is better than the video itself. Because YouTube is part of a massive corporation, they really like to promote these types of video that they employ this practice for monetary reasons. This further hides the really talented and skilled creators that we have on this website that don't get what they deserve. I'm not original when I say this, and constantly complaining about a corporation and website that doesn't have my interests in mind is pretty unpragmatic. That's why I don't do it often. YouTube also inadvertently is promoting intellectual stagnation with its promotion of content that only makes money. I can make this argument for almost every other website, and I will eventually go into a full video about it. I'm not going to go into a spiel here because it's going to be a few thousand more words. I really don't have a smoking gun answer here because the answer is still very ambiguous. So here's a question to gauge discussion. How do you view clickbait on an ethical and moral standard? When is it acceptable to use? Do the ends justify the means when it's used? Does the landscape need to be reformed? Please talk about this in the comments. Again, my stance on clickbait is very negative. I don't try to use it in my thumbnails and titles because I want an honest approach. Except for this video. But, you know, that's just an example. Whoops!